Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. His name is William V. Taylor Jr., and he's just published a book in July 9th, 2021, which I completed just today. The title of that book is On Full Automatic, Surviving 13 Months in Vietnam. It's a very detailed book and very first-person account of his harrowing time in Vietnam in 1967 and 68. And it has deservedly has 25-star reviews on Amazon right now, just within the last 6 weeks of publication. So I highly recommend this book, but Mr. Taylor can talk about it more in detail. So William Taylor, are you there?
Hi, it's really great being on your program, and I'm looking forward to talking about my book and let everybody know exactly what it's about.
Great. Well, I am too. So for people maybe not, this is your first book as far as I could tell. For people may not have known your background, can you talk about what it took to write this book and go back to all those years? It's been 50 years almost since those years of the late 60s, and what it was like to put your experiences on paper.
You know, it started back in 1986 when I started. I went through the PTSD. I went through the Agent Orange stuff with Bill Curtis, and a guy called me out of the clear blue sky and asked me if I was Bill Taylor, and I said, yeah. He said, were you a Marine? And I go, yeah. And he said, were you with the 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, Charlie Company? And I go, yeah, who is this? He said, my name is Joe Klein, and I'm writing an article with Rolling Stones magazine about this guy that got killed in Hammond, Indiana. And he said, did you ever hear of Gary Cooper? And I go, yeah, he was one of the guys in my platoon. And he said, well, he was the one that was killed. And then he started asking me questions about the Vietnam War, and I just exploded. It was just like, for the first time, someone really wants to know about the war. And I started telling him stories. I overwhelmed him with stories of, what happened. And then he went, and I gave him the names of a few the guys that I knew, and he went and interviewed them, and then interviewed more and more. He eventually ended up going to my entire platoon. And then he went to Headquarters Marine Corps and looked up the records, and he decided to write a book. And it was called Payback, 5 Marines After Vietnam, and I was one of those Marines. He takes us into one battle, was Operation Cochise. And that's when I really discovered that, this story needs to get out. And then I started over a period of time. We went on a book tour we went to, New York City. We went through Times Square, the bookstores, clubs, and everything all over. We went on this great book tour, and it was exciting. And I really wanted to write. Once I started getting the stories out of me, I really wanted to start writing them. So I started writing stories, and they were, I'm a high school graduate, and they were kind of crude. But I noticed that every time I finished a story, I would cry and try to get this out of me. And so then I started writing more and more stories. And then I realized that I could put them in an order of when they happened. And then I realized that, this is my 13-month tour in Vietnam. And I said, this is actually going to be the making of a good book. And I started telling people I'm going to be writing this book. But I didn't really start getting into it until 3.5 years ago. And that's when I really decided to be really serious about putting this thing together. And of course, it was a big, huge emotional roller coaster. And I finished it about 1.5 years ago, the manuscript. And I was ready to actually publish it. And I talked to somebody that this friend of mine, his name is Cody. He really helped me understand that the book needed some more work. So I ended up hiring some editors, and boy, they were good. They were really good. And they helped with, the tenses and getting the, this doesn't make a little, you need to refine this. You need to do more show and don't tell. That was one of the things about the book that I realized is I had to actually show people what was going on. I couldn't just walk and say, there's the mountains. I had to actually say, what type of mountains and how were they lush, were they green, were there clouds over them. So that's what I started doing throughout the whole book, was like, not only did I write the manuscript, but now I had to rewrite the book in such a way that people would feel what I felt. And that's what made the book what it is. I mean, I wrote a great book, but with the help of the editors and with Cody, I ended up creating this incredible book that everybody seems to say it really, I mean, I've had Marines that said that it helped them so much. There was this one lady, she called me out of the clear blue sky and she said, "I want to thank you." And I said, "For what?" And she said, "Well, my dad read your book. He read your manuscript. And he never talked about the war." He says, as a matter of fact, when he came back from Vietnam, he became a big drinker. And my mom couldn't take that, and she divorced him, and he moved off into the hills of Alabama. Well, I've never been able to have a relationship until he read your manuscript. And I've got to tell you, I've been waiting for 50 years, and now I have this relationship I never had before. And as a matter of fact, he asked me to take him to buy jeans. Well, that brought tears to my eyes, because that's what this book was supposed to do, was to get people to understand of what the Vietnam vets went through. And also, you know, who's going to say what's going on, whatever happened in Vietnam? I mean, you just really don't see a lot of books about, you know, the point of view of this grunt and what he had to do and what he went through and how he tried to survive, because the battalion kept on getting wiped out over and over and over. And how I managed to survive is, you know, I finally came up with the conclusion that I think I was to survive to write this book, to tell the world about what it was like to be a Marine in Vietnam and to go through what I went through.
And I think that you're kind of also telling the story of people who didn't make it. There's so many names in the book of people who didn't make it out alive. And so you kind of, I think you're doing a duty to those lost soldiers or fallen soldiers too, who aren't around to tell what happened to them. So I credit you for that as well. And I think you're really right. The descriptive phrases that you have in the book about the heat, the, you know, really super thirst, and kind of the environment of Vietnam really comes through very strong in my reading of your book. So kudos to you for that as well. But you, and we talked about this in the pre-show, you were kind of the classic 19, the median age, if people don't know, of people fighting the Vietnam War was 19, and you were 19 as well. I'm going to put up the picture on the back of you on YouTube so people can see that as well. But can you talk about how, and you start the book off with almost just kind of being put off a boat and sent into the into combat. Can you talk about your what was specific about your military unit and what you kind of did starting off in Vietnam War in 1967?
Sure. You know, so when I joined the Marines in 1966, I really wanted to tell this. So I joined the Marines and I went to the recruiter. I went to all the recruiters, first of all, and then I ended up at the Marine recruiter. And he had told me, I said, "What about this, you know, Vietnam War that's going on right now?" And he told me, he said, "Oh, come on." He said, "You know, this America's the greatest country in the world. I mean, this is just a police action. This thing's going to be over by the time you get out of boot camp." Well, that was so far from the truth. That was a big sales pitch is all that was. And what I did is I found myself going over on a jet and ending up in a place called Okinawa. It's an island. And it was a training ground for Marines to prepare them for Vietnam. And what they had done is the Marines had brought this battalion over from Vietnam to refit it, to give it the brand new M16s. We were the first one to get the M16s. They wanted to train us in Mike boat training, into Amtrak training, into helicopter training, into night ambushes and you know, camouflage. I mean, everything that you can think of. We trained for it was over a month and a half. And when the captain came out, he said, "So you're probably wondering why we're putting you through this training." And it's because you're going to be the Special Landing Force Alpha. SLF is what we call it. And we're going to be the reactionary. We're going to, whenever there's a battalion that runs, or a company, whoever runs into help, we're going to fly in there and we're going to save the day. And of course, wow, we're going to be the special landing force. And little did I know that, we were up against regiments of NVA and VC. We were up against the toughest. And we went into the Quezon Valley and, the street without joy. I mean, we were in the DMZ. I mean, the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, the Walking Dead, they were an entire company of 250 men was whittled down to like 35, 40 men. And the dead bodies were laying out there, and the regiment was still out there. And they called us in. They said, we need the SLF. And then they called in other battalions coming in from different directions. I think Lam Sung 54 was going on, and they called the Vietnamese army to come in there. And we all merged into this one huge battle in the DMZ called Operation Buffalo. We were in so many different situations where we were sweeping for the enemy, or we'd be a blocking force for another battalion coming in and sweeping towards us.
Right, you called it the anvil and hammer, at least one of the operations. But
Yeah.
that was a common word used throughout the book, was sweep. It seemed like you guys were constantly moving. And just for people who don't know, your force was what, 1,750 men, 68 officers, I think is what you said in the book.
Right. And, they were forward observers. I mean, they were talented men. The problem is that, we had, when I first joined it, we had the best platoon commander. We had the best of everything. And after Beaver Cage, we lost our executive officer. I mean, we were losing men left and right, and a helicopter assault. And it was, we trained in Okinawa, but we didn't train in 105-degree heat with, humidity factors through the roof. And,
booby traps and mines and snakes. I mean,
being ambushed out of the clear blue sky. And they set it up in such a way that you started realizing, I mean, the longer you were there and the longer you were able to survive, the more you learned how to survive. And I think that's what got me through Vietnam. Is I had been there a long time, and I had developed skills of being on full automatic. My body was on full automatic. If someone fired at you, someone was shooting, you were down. You were down in safety as far as you could get. You could crawl as faster than a lizard. You were trying to get out of the line of fire. So you just did everything you could to avoid being hit. So not only was your body on full automatics, but so in order to gain fire superiority, you would fire your M16 on full automatic. And, I really like the name of the book, because that's, if even when you came home from Vietnam, you made it back, if there was a backfire, you still hit the ground because your body was still on that full automatic. And I know a lot of guys that I know can relate to that. So, yeah.
And I think that's kind of an experience of a lot of not just Vietnam veterans, but also Gulf War, Iraq, is really just ramped up all the time. And I thought it was interesting in your book how the timing moved. Everybody's counting the months and days until 13 months happens. Such an important element in all of the soldiers' lives, and how when you came in, the older, more seasoned soldiers look at you differently, and then you became that seasoned soldier.
That's right. Then you became. But, that's exactly what would happen. And so what I found my job is to try to train these guys as best I could, and to communicate with them and get them to understand what was happening out there and what they're going to be up against. Because, man, when all of a sudden the guy a few feet away from you sets off a bouncing Betty or something, they're away from you, because Bouncing Betty would just kills everybody around you, or it kills the person that steps on it and then wounds everybody in a, even close.
And that's the booby trap you step on and it shoots up in the air, right?
It's like a mortar shell and it blows up. The higher up, the more it spreads out and it hits your face. But if it blows up around your chest, it blows your chest out. And of course, if it blows up near your feet, we know what happens there. So, yeah, it's. We ran across it just over and over and over. It just you go.
How long? Sorry, please continue.
No, you go through so many people, so many officers. I mean, every platoon commander I had was either wounded or killed. Every sergeant that I had was wounded and killed, or relieved of duty. Every squad leader, every platoon sergeant. It was nonstop. And then, I became a squad leader. It's like, well, I'll tell you what. I'm not going to give any hand signals. I'm going to be one of the guys out here. You better listen up, because I'm not going to give who I am away, because they really aimed for the guys that were given the orders.
The VC,
yeah,
or Charlie. You call him Charlie.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just so remarkable. It's kind of just the feel of the book is like you're just thrown out into these jungles to find, and you're kind of like hunter teams of groups going out to find the enemy. Does that seem called you?
Sure. I even explain it like, we were like this big army going in there, and the Vietnamese were stealthy, black pajamas, and, just carrying just enough ammunition in their AK-47s. They were stealthy. So, we had to adapt to that, and we had to carry food for 3 days. We never had a hot meal flown to us in the field. It was always, sea rations. That's what we ate for 13 months. It was definitely a journey of survival.
Right. And you were out there, you said in one operation, I think it was 25 total operations is what you defined, but one, you were out in the jungle or there for an entire month, right? So, I mean,
right.
That's,
a month and a half at times.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, and then we'd go aboard the ship, we'd refit, we'd 3 or 4 or 5 days, and we're right back out doing another operation somewhere else. See, we went from operation, we'd sweep to a certain place, we'd get on trucks and we'd go to another operation. We'd sweep, or we'd be a blocking force, and then the helicopters would pick us up and take us to another operation. So in that time, we just never had time to reflect, to look back, and we couldn't get in trouble, not unless we were aboard ship, because we were trying to say, all of us were trying to make it through our tour.
And I mean, it seemed like you didn't even get much R&R. I think you only got 5 days, at least. It took 9 months to get R&R.
Oh, that was amazing, because you go from February and then all the way to December before I got my first R&R, and then I go on an R&R, and when I come back, my squad leader's dead. And maybe they sweep up to the DMZ and he's dead, and the machine gun crews were napalmed, and they're gone, and you got all these new people coming, and poor guys, they came out of boot camp through infantry training and then put right into the battlefield. Some of them so unable to be there. We just ran into such a shortage of men. And, we've got to say, I was in the Marines and we went through hell, but it wasn't only the Marines. I mean, it was the Army. The Army came in somewhere around November, 101st Airborne, because the Marines, they just kept on getting wiped out. And it's not that they were not good. It's just that so many enemy were thrown at us over and over, and they just, it just kept on coming.
Seemed like that waves and waves of just much more. Oh, you're outnumbered 5-10 to 1. It seems like.
And the Army got hit just as bad as us. I mean, they started getting their butts kicked too. I mean, when I say my butt kicked, I'm saying we always killed more them than we ended up killing. And of course, that's what it became, a war of numbers. How many did we kill and how many did they kill? It's like it became a war of numbers.
That was kind of a famous thing about Robert McNamara, right? He's always had graphs and tabulating digits and things like that.
Right. And that was part of the problem too, because, we're trying to, fight this war. And the key to this whole thing is, I remember thinking, who are we fighting? We're fighting the North Vietnamese and the VC, the Viet Cong, right? But who are the VC? They were the South Vietnamese. So who are we fighting? I mean, the Vietnamese are supposed to be on our side. and then you find out it's just the cities that had the people that were supposed to be towards us. And of course, they, I don't want to say that I'm sure that there was a lot of good South Vietnamese fighters, but the ones we ran across weren't, they had fires going. I mean, we set up our fields of fire. We're quiet. This guy smoked. He had his poncho. He smoked under the poncho. They're over there playing radios and with fires. I mean, what you go, do they know something we don't know, or what is going on here?
I mean, you kind of do mention, like you said, that somebody had to be spying or something like that, because it seemed like the enemy was getting information. But also, I was curious that you thought that a lot of the locals just wanted everything out. You said they were like Stone Age farmers and fishermen, and I mean, it must have made a really curious impression upon you guys.
Right. They're just trying to eke out a living is what they were trying to do. They were just trying to make it through to another day, get their farms, get their rice. The Viet Cong would come in and take their rice, and then threaten them if they had anything to do with us. And then we'd sweep through, and they didn't want anything to do with us because they didn't want reprisals by the Viet Cong. If they did anything that made them look like they were supporting us, they would be killed. There would be no doubt about it. They would be killed.
So they were just kind of stuck in the middle, like innocent civilians stuck in the middle. Their kids were getting brutalized.
Yep, that's what I tried to explain, and I tried to show that these people that just wanted to be left alone. And of course, we looked like invaders. I mean, we really did look like this big group of men coming through, and a lot of the 18 and 19-year-old kids that were coming through the Marines at that time some of them were given a choice. Do you want to go to jail, or do you want to join the Marines and fight for our country? So you want to go to jail for 2 years, or are you going to join the Marines for 2 years? What do you want to do? And that's what some of the judges did. And that's the kind of people we got. We got people who are like, they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to be a Marine. But the first group that I went through, I noticed there was a shift as the longer I was there, the guys that started coming in, there was a lot of great men that came in, don't get me wrong. But I noticed the attitudes started changing. And of course, the Martin Luther King had passed away, was killed. And of course, that changed a lot of attitudes from some of the men who just happened to feel that, they didn't need to be there, that it wasn't their war. So,
you served with a lot of African Americans. I think you mentioned something like there's a race war brewing back in the United States at that time. But.
Yeah, and the thing is like the thing is, once you're in Vietnam, you're a brother, and the brotherhood was really strong. If I didn't care what race you were, you depended on that person that was next to you, and you really looked out for him, and he looked out for you. It was like there was no race really. Towards the end of my tour, I noticed there was different attitudes changing, but for the most part, if you were a Marine, and you were brothers, and that's the way it is right now. We go to the 3rd Marine Division Association reunion every year, and we're brothers. We're all brothers, and we hug each other. We love each other because we fought and we knew what we did for this country. And it was a crazy war. And,
right. And you were kind of there where it hadn't really soured as much in the American mind. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we weren't actually when we got there. It was the same mindset because we're just nothing but in battle. I mean, we're not reading news. We're not hearing radio. We're just fighting for month after month after month. That's why a lot of these guys came back, and it's a lot of guys had trouble with assimilating back in and drank, and some took drugs, and then there was the group that joined the police force and wanted to keep that adrenaline flowing because that's like a high. They keep that adrenaline going. I always look for the adrenaline rush myself. I remember at one time I got a radio. It was one of the radios of police calls, fire, and everything. And I actually got the adrenaline rush from listening to police calls. I mean, you get that rush inside you, and I ended up becoming a trader at the Chicago Board of Trade in the commodities, wheat, corn, bean, meal, and oil, and that was an adrenaline rush. The whole thing. I was trading options, and you get in that pit, and boy, you feel that adrenaline flowing.
Adrenaline, the time compresses, and it becomes super intense.
Yeah. The thing is, it made me stronger. It really made me stronger to go through what I went through. And I come back home and I listen to people complaining about, something, their boss, their job, they lost their job or something. To me, it's like, all right, just move on. Let's get going. That's minor compared to what I went through. And my wife,
the stresses over time had to be just incredible for all you guys.
Oh,
just the fear and the deaths and the body bags.
Right. And carrying your guys to the helicopter, and like the picture you see on Full Automatic. That's exactly what we did. That's exactly the way we dressed. That's exactly the helicopter that we got into. And it does represent exactly that moment in time. And for 13 months, that's what we did. And the Marines, we didn't have good. Our packs were just small little packs. The Army had the nice packs with pockets and all that other stuff. We didn't have any of that. We had the same food from the Korean War, from what I understand. They gave us the C rations from the Korean War. They had, the Marines they didn't have a lot of money, and so we ended up with this horrible M16 that kept on jamming, and they said clean it, it'll and we cleaned it and it kept jamming no matter what. If you fired so many rounds through that, it just jammed. It was horrible. Wow. I went through so many M16s. It was terrible.
I think when you ended up the book, you were let off 2 weeks early because it was your third Purple Heart, but you tried to give a gun back that wasn't. It's actually kind of silly bureaucratic kind of stuff. They expected you to give back the same gun you had when you first started, right?
Right. It was absurd, and they were going to make me pay for that gun, and I'm going. I just exploded. I just couldn't believe that this guy was going to make me pay for the M16. I even grabbed the M16 he had. If I'm paying for that one, then you're not getting this one. And that was a bureaucratic craziness. And some new guy who didn't know. He never had experience what I went through. And unfortunately, there was a lot of interactions between officers that doesn't normally exist in our military today. I mean, when you start questioning the people that are leading you because they're brand new coming in and they're making you do something that is wrong, you have to tell them. And when you do, if they want to overpower you with their, because they're in command, well, they don't know what's going on. They're not listening to you. And when you're there, you're trying to explain it to them. And there was a lot of great leadership, and there was bad leadership, and those were the people that were relieved of command in the middle of battles. After the battle is over, let's get rid of him. He's no good.
Right. It seemed like there were constantly shifting groups. You just had a new mix every week or two, different leader, different guy, bad guy goes to the brig. This is the good guy. Everybody in the platoon wants this guy to run it. You guys have more experience than the new guys. I mean, it's really
and then right. And then you love him, and you love this guy, and then he dies. He gets killed, and then you go, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Who's coming next? I mean, they were just going through the leadership like crazy, and
that's part of the survival, right? I mean, what other kind of, do you remember? I mean, it seems like that war was had a lot more kind of craziness to it maybe than other cut and dried wars where you had boundaries and things. I mean,
it was the first televised war, and it was, a lot of people got to see it on TV, and that's what caused a lot of protesters coming out when they saw what was going on. But then their focus was on us. We're the bad guys, and of course, when we did come home, we were spit at. I mean, you have no idea to go through what I went through, and then have people yelling at you in an airport. It's because you've got your uniform on, and you're just come from hell. And I remember when Payback was, we went on that book tour, and I was telling the guy that I was sitting next to, I was telling him about Vietnam and about the book and stuff. And when I got off the airplane, the lady behind me had caught up to me, and she said, can I talk to you? And I go, sure. I said, yeah, absolutely. She says, I just want to let you know, I was one of the protesters that was spitting at you and was yelling at you and calling you names. And I want your forgiveness. I want you to please forgive me for what I did. And I realized that it wasn't only the guys that came home that became victims of this. The victims were the people who then realized that they were going after the wrong person. The people that felt guilty because they didn't go over to Vietnam, because they felt they needed to. They wished they had been. I wish I could have been there for you guys. And it's like I tell them all. I go, it's a good thing you didn't have to go through what I went through. You'd be messed up today. You'd be all screwed up, because all these guys that came back from all these combat situations, just like what's going on from our Afghan and Iraq vets. I mean, there's so many guys that come back with this. And that's another reason why I wrote the book, was to make sure that, to let these guys know that came back that, this stuff is still inside me. And I'm the one that's opening up and expressing this stuff. And I want them to do the same thing. So that's another reason why I wrote the book, because I know these guys, they're going through the same thing I went through, but in a different sense. Maybe, they're in the desert, and they're in this horrible situation. And some of these poor guys do things, you're young and you do things that you're really not proud of. And,
and you said that this was a cathartic experience for you, so it kind of got that kind of some of those bad memories out. Maybe would you suggest that as an option for some of these other people going through PTSD or having bad memories?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Bill. To write it down, and even if you don't want anybody to read it, but just put it down on paper and to get it out of you. I know when I was through with my story, there's a story about a baby in there, and I cried. I mean, I cried for days over that one story. Still, to this day, brings up, emotion. And so getting that out, that stuff that sits inside you, in your mind, it's hidden inside there. And unless you get that stuff out, unless you can bring it out in the open, it's just going to fester, and you'll be like me. I'm 74 years old. I'm still thinking about that war like it was yesterday. And these guys need to know that, sometimes you just need to talk it out. You need to get that stuff out of you. And even if you just write it and throw it up and tear it up and throw it away, maybe that's what you need to do. Or maybe you need to write a book like I did and get it out.
Yeah, I mean, there's really important stories. I think this is a very important story for people to know, really firsthand account and how harrowing these wars were. War can be. It's, I think you really conveyed that expertly in this book, is about how life can be short. And even the baby sequence, you talk about this baby, like there's a human element there too. Even in this war, there's, really terrible, unfortunate things. I don't know. It's kind of a mystery. And that was actually not uncommon for a lot of the Vietnam, a lot of orphans and things like that, kids who may have been the sons of some of these military guys. Did you ever find out whatever happened to that baby, or was it just go to an orphanage?
You're not the only one that asked me that. A lot of people asked me. And no, and when I came back, I was so full of PTSD, and I still had to serve another 2.5 more years in the Marines. And there's this rule that if you were wounded 3 times, they can't send you back to a combat zone for 2 years. So I ended up in Cuba, and when I joined the Marines, I made under $100 a month. I mean, it's hard to believe that a person could survive on that. $100 a month. It's nothing. And it was nothing back then. But, you find a way to survive and you make it through. And but I look at the whole experience as that it made me strong. It made me who I am. It made me be a good man. And I think it helped. I think it helped a lot.
Right. And where's the best place that people can obtain this book?
Amazon right now has it. I know that the hardcover is coming out in about 3 weeks, and then we're going to go ebook. And after all that, then we're going to do an audio. I want to. There's a lot of vets that have problems with their sight, and I'd like them to be able to experience the book also. So I'm going to have to find a studio to sit down and actually do this audio book, and I'm going to do it and get it out there for everybody. I think it's something that everybody should read. I really do.
I agree. I mean, I think it's really important to see how you've got this experience set in time, this 13 months right there, and what a harrowing experience it was to be in Vietnam. But more and more people are listening to their books than reading them now. It's much more convenient. So it's very prudent to get out an audiobook. And you also have a website, correct? It's WilliamVTaylor.com. Yeah,
that's William V as in Vincent Taylor.com. And if anybody wants to contact me, there's a place in there that if you go to my website, you can text, you can send me a message, and I'll get back to you. I didn't want to put my email out there for everybody, because you never know who's going to try to communicate with you. But if someone is sincere and really wants to talk, especially right now, I'm getting maybe between 1 and 3 messages a day from people, either via text, email. Some people call, some people found my address and have written me, and it's very touching, the things that I've heard. I mean, I haven't had one person say anything like this is like bad or anything else. I know that some of the Marines who've read this, some of the combat veterans who actually read this, it's touched their lives profoundly, and it's made a difference. And that's what the book is supposed to do, is to reach out to these different people, these different soldiers that fought for our country, and that they can't talk about their experience, and their families even say they can't talk about it. But if people want to know what their family member went through, just buy the book, read the book, and you'll understand why they can't talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Really terrible experiences. Again, the title of the book is On Full Automatic: Surviving 13 Months in Vietnam, just published July 9th, 2021. The author, again, is William V. Taylor Jr. So, William, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Great. Thanks. All right. So that's the end of that.